Okay guys, today we are talking about percents, decimals, and fractions. By now you should have already listened to the video that was posted to an earlier slide and should have an understanding about how to convert between the three different rational numbers. We are going to go through this chart together. At any time you can pause or you can rewind the video so that you can get a little bit more clarification as to how I solved a certain problem. I also have some scrap paper near me because I think some of these problems will require a little extra work. So let's get started. The first row is already done for us. We have 22%. They moved the decimal 2 times to the left and got 0.22. That last number is in the hundredth spot, so they put 22 over 100 and simplified the fraction so that it was 11 over 50. Let's look at 10%. That percent tells us that it's 10 out of 100, so we can go right to fraction form if we want to and do 10 out of 100. We also could take this decimal point. This is the number 10, so there's a hidden decimal back there, making the decimal move 10 spots to the left, so we have 0.1. 0.1, 1 is in the 10th spot, so we know that 10 will be our final denominator and 1 is our numerator. So 10 out of 100 simplifies to 1/10. This is our row 2 is 55 hundredths. The last number is a 5 in the 100th spot. So we make 100 our denominator and 55 our numerator. Again, we're going to have to simplify this fraction. 5 can go into both of these numbers. 5 goes into 55 11 times, and it goes into 100 20 times. So our final answer is 11 out of 20. We're going to use this 55 out of 100, though, because we know that it is 55%. We also could have moved this decimal point 2 spots to the right and gotten the number 55. Let's move on to the next row, 3 hundredths. We know that 3 needs to go in the 100th spot, so there needs to be a 0 here. This is a pretty small number, which means we're going to have a pretty small percent. If I have 0.03 and I move the decimal 2 times this way, I end up with just the number 3. So my percent is 3%. 100% is the whole thing. It's a whole number. So 100%. There's no decimal there, but if I was to move the decimal 2 times this way, we end up with just the number 1, 1.0. So for my fraction, I have a whole, 1 out of 1. You could also write 2 out of 2 or 3 out of 3, any number that simplifies. In the next row, we have the decimal 7/10. That means that 10 is going to be my denominator and 7 will be my numerator. 7/10 is already simplified. If I move the decimal for 0.7 2 times, it goes this way. I need to add a 0 here as a placeholder, and I have the number 70%. 9/10 is going to put a 9 in the 10th place value. Almost a whole, so 0.9, move that decimal 2 times. Again, just like I did for 70, I have to add a 0 there, so 9/10 is going to be 90%. Looking at 88%, that's 88 out of 100, or 88 hundredths we can do. I'm going to have to simplify this fraction. They're both even, so I know that 2 goes into both of these numbers, but also 4 goes into both of these numbers, and since 4 is bigger, I'm going to use the 4. It goes into 88 22 times, and 4 goes into 125 times. This fraction is reduced, and it's our... At this point, you need to move on to the next slide. If you need to take a quick break before you do so, or you have any other questions, you can go back and rewatch the first part of this video. Pause here. All right, looking at 1/100th, that is 1 over 100. It's a simplified fraction. And it's also a pretty small fraction. If I move the decimal point 2 times, 0.01, and I go 1, 2, I just end up with 1%. 1/4 or 1/4, it makes me think of, is one of those fractions that we maybe want to have memorized because it's one of those ones that we see a lot. 1/4, as I said, makes me think of 1/4, and 1/4 is 25 cents. 25% would go there as well. If I wasn't too sure about the quarter and I wanted to figure it out a different way, I can also divide the denominator into the numerator. So I can do 4 divided into 1. We know that 4 doesn't go into 1, so I would put a decimal and make it into 10. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 we know is 8. If I work through this problem and I subtract this, I get 2, add another 0, and 4 goes into 25 times. So same answer, just 2 different ways of solving through. 20%, I can move my decimal 2 times to the left, which is 0.2. I can write it as 2/10. And I need to simplify. Both of these are even numbers. 2 goes into both of them. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. So my final answer would be 1/5. 91 hundredths is going to be 91%. 91 can go over 100. And luckily, 91 is a prime number, so I can't reduce that fraction anymore. 3/5, we're going to have to figure out in one of 2 ways. The easiest way is to say 5 can go into 10, and it could even go into 100 if I wanted to make it even easier. But I can do 5 times 2 to give me 10, and I can do 3 times 2 to give me 6. So I can say an equivalent fraction is 6 out of 10. 6 out of 10 would just be 0.6. And then I can move my decimal point 2 times, put a 0 there, so I get 60%. Another way that you can solve is dividing like you did for the 4 into the 1. You can do 5 into 3. 5 doesn't go into 3, but 5 does go into 30, so we'd put our decimal there, and we have 0.6 as our answer. So again, we divided, but we got the same answers. Last few problems. 57%, move the decimal 2 times, and I have 0.57. That's 57 over 100. And 57 is also prime, so I'm done with that. All right, we've got 2 problems left. This 5 is in the 100th spot. Sorry, it's refocusing. This 5 is in the 100th spot, so we can do 5 over 100. 5 goes into both of those numbers, so 5 goes into 5 one time, so I have a 1. Sorry, it kind of looks like a 7. That's a 1. And then my denominator, 5 goes into 100 20 times. So I end up with 1/20th. And if I have this 0.05 to make it a percent, just move it 2 times. I have 5%. And finally, I have 24 over 25. I need to figure out what the decimal is going to be, and I have 2 options to doing that. I know that 25 can go into 100, so I can do 24 over 25, make 100 my denominator by timesing this by 4. If I times 24 by 4, I get 96. 96 out of 100 is 96%. It's also 0.96 hundredths. If I didn't like that method, I think this one's a little more difficult, but I can divide 25 into 24. It does not go into 24, so we make it 240. It goes into that 9 times. If I work through the problem, I get 225. I need to then subtract 225 from 240, I get 15. Bring my 0 down, I get 150, and 25 goes in to 156 times. So I still end up with 0.96, or 96% if I divide it that way. At this point, you have finished the chart. You can go back and review any part of the notes that you might want to review. If you are ready to move on, you can go to the next slide. The next slide has another video if you feel like you still want some extra help, or it gives you directions for the classwork if you are ready to move on.